existed and that was actually created as a mythological figure onto which a lot was projected. And this is where the New Age stuff comes in. Onto him was projected the particular character traits or abilities of previous solar gods and deities. Now, I'm not going to go into that. That's been so well covered that if anyone wants to go and Google that, they will soon get a good summary. Or better still, watch Zeitgeist. So, hopefully, Peter's going to update the information in that. As this information grows, the Christians are going to really get on their high horse about it, simply because, in their eye, it's suggesting that Jesus didn't exist and was a myth. Well, I can tell you that's simply not true. I started my research many years ago, actually wanting to prove quite simply that Jesus didn't exist. And that was quite simple, because if you look back in history, there's no mention of him, you know? There's no mention anywhere, except back in those times. Similarly, you'll find there's no mention of the equivalent figure within Islam or within Judaism. They're not mentioned. In real life, there's no record of these people. So, logic dictates either they didn't exist and everything's been made up, or they did and everything's being removed so that you can't actually find it. Leaping on a lot, I came into contact with many figures, senior figures within various churches, politicians, secret society members, that call themselves wonderful titles, whatever. Without exception, it was clear to me that it was known, it had been known for a long time who Jesus was, whether he was special or not. Clearly, no secret society throughout the ages has regarded Jesus as the Son of God. They do regard him as a fella, a guy who did something. Now, what I want to summarize today is what you will find if you go and look. This doesn't make it right, but what I am saying is that were you to be in the position where you can sit down with senior church figures and actually get them to talk openly to you about this, as I have done, I won't drop names because I can't. Try it yourselves is what I'm saying. You'll find out that this is true. The first thing they'll say, or point out clearly to you, is yes, the church is well aware that Jesus was made up. And again, I'm terrible with names, but was it not Pope Pius who said this myth of Christ has served us well? It's all on record. But the Christians don't want to believe it. 2,000 years has gone by and Christian history can be researched by anybody. Your Albigensian Crusades, the whole thing. To put some perspective on it, if you go back 2,000 years to the time of Jesus and so on, an awful lot was happening. Rome controlled everything, as they do today, incidentally. Nothing ever changed, it just got worse. There was this guy, Jesus. Now, is rarely named in literature because a few tricks have been pulled. Now, if there's any serious researchers here who want to go and look at this particular story, I'll give you some clues. These are things that are known within the church and at a high level. And when you can't believe that, you have to then take what's known and go and have a look for yourself. But the second you do, you will find that the whole story unfolds. I'll touch now on who Jesus was, and that should perhaps bring me to the point where the next part will be relevant. Who was he? Well, he was just this guy. He was a human. Some God didn't put him there. We will get to the esoteric side in a minute, because God puts you all here if you happen to believe in a God. Who was he? Well, history tells you, if you go and look. Who he was the last of a pharaonic line that stemmed from Egypt. That's who he was, in exile. He found himself in Judea. Now, so bear in mind, you have a prince, a king in waiting here, the Judaic line, the bloodline that goes right back. The Bible tells you this clearly. It also tells you he was of the order of Melchizedek, which, again, if you research, is a Pythagorean order. This isn't made up, by the way. It's all, in fact, I think the letter from the Born Again will quote the references in the Bible where that's mentioned, but I'm not into that. It's not about that. Go and do it for yourself. The order of Melchizedek, Pythagorean order. Jesus named as a priest of this order. Now Jesus was wanted or intended to be a priest king in Judea. This priest king, the duality of being both the priest and the king, is very relevant. You find that people in this world today are maneuvering now for that position. Jesus did not go through the process that is detailed in the Bible. All right? They say he died on the cross, and yet the Bible itself tells you he didn't die on the cross. The Quran tells you that too. The Bible will point out, if you know how to read it, and I'll give you some insights as to how to do this, that he was taken down off the cross by the very person who put him there. And it's who put him there that's actually the key to history. So anyone researching the last 2,000 years, go take a look at this. What I'm saying is that I discovered this by being told it in the first place, and then found the research afterwards which proves it, and then did that. And I stumbled across many figures who will support that and so on. So at risk of being offensive to anyone who believes in Jesus, he was a priest king who was in exile, arguably the last of a bloodline of the pharaohs, and he wanted his power back. Now again in the Bible it will tell you that his acolytes, the 13 around him, it tells you what they were. In reality they were tax collectors. Jesus taxed his population. That's what he did. He was a king, and he considered it his divine right to tax his population. Didn't like it when the Romans reneged on the agreement. There's huge passages in the Bible about this. It really annoyed him, because suddenly he was not getting the taxes from his people in Judea. He was going to Rome. He stood up, rallied his people, and created a revolution. That's what he was doing. Not only was it a revolution against Rome, it was a revolution to topple Rome and to become Caesar as well. There's a great passage, again I won't go into all the detail, in the Bible that's been disputed by historians for a long, long time as to what its interpretation actually means. And if anyone happens to know one, it is about the bald head. They call him bald head, bald head. That's really strange, because he wasn't bald. In fact, the only description of Jesus that does exist has him with ginger hair, which is an interesting point, because that would put him in Scotland or similar. We will come back to that. That is where he came from, incidentally. Bald head is just, it means Caesar. That's all it meant. Caesar had a bald head. It's just like calling him a baldy coot today. They're saying to Jesus, step forth, baldy. You're Caesar now. These were his friends. These were his people chanting at him. How can you decode all of this? Because it's laid before you. It's what is called the Hermetic Code. Now, researchers into the Bible and history have agreed for decades. This is not disputed by anyone, the church either. There's the Pesher Code exists within the Bible, which is a simple number-letter swap system, the simplest code that you can come across. These people writing these documents at the time, if they wrote down what they wanted to say, they would be executed by the Romans. This was their enemy. So they didn't write it down, they did it as we do today. We allude to things and we write it down, replacing this with that, whatever. It's a natural human process, but that exists in the Bible. Go and research the Pesher Codes. It's all very simple, the Pesher Code. What the Pesher Code then relays to you is that there are further codes within the Bible. Now, you've all heard of the Bible Code, perhaps. I think, is it Drosnin wrote the book about the Bible Code? Well worth reading. If you generally look out there, you'll hear, oh, that was overturned ages ago, it's just nonsense, it's just unproven. But I can tell you, if you go and look properly, the great mathematicians around the world have not done that and are most disturbed by what's being uncovered. In other words, they accept it's there, they accept it's showing this stuff, but they don't understand why.